Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mystical Woo Academy. Tonight, we are so honored to have our friend and colleague and loved one, Trena. Welcome, Trena.
Thank you.
Go
Okay.
ahead. Take it away.
Yep. I was going to say, you ready? Tonight is about vulnerability and how it becomes your armor. I know all of you know me, so I don't have to go and explain really my story, but this is something I found through the process, particularly through shadow work, is that as we can release the guilt and the shame that are behind all of those shadows, we can step into a place of power. The mechanism behind this is probably most cleverly illustrated in our politics. You know, if you have a politician that cheated on his wife, like all of these things that we condemn people for, but he's honest about it, we've had quite a few people get elected because they owned their shadows. And by being honest about it, there was nothing nobody could say that used that then against them. And it's the same mechanism, except we're the ones using it against ourselves. I've told the story, but it's very important for this particular class is, you know, my father sexually molested me when I was in 4th grade. And I worked through the shadows. There was many layers, multiple people to forgive. I've actually reached the point at which I have gratitude because it has allowed me to help other people who have similar shadows. Very much like an alcoholic is not going to take advice when they're trying to get sober from someone who's never been there. And so that is something I am actually grateful I had the root, because I've been able to clear myself of the shadows that were attached with it. Now, the way that that becomes my armor is here was something I carried shame about. I had believed until I forgave myself that I was responsible for it because I had become promiscuous afterwards. It was my way of dealing. Many people in the similar situation will react usually one of two ways: either stay the hell away from me, everybody, or if it's going to be taken, I might as well give it away because now it's on my terms and I have control over it. But I had a lot of shame and a lot of self-flagellation, especially because of going promiscuous, because no matter how much I said, I am claiming my power and there's nothing wrong with sex, and there is nothing wrong with sex, I wasn't using it as a way to actually empower myself, to enjoy life and embrace life. I used it like an avenging angel, like that it was wounded. It was me trying to fill in where I didn't have self-love, was a big empty hole. And so sex for me was the validation, being able to let go of the guilt and the shame behind then projecting, 16-year-old me onto 11-year-old me, opened up the door. And now it still took months later, but it allowed me to start to heal the part of myself that still carried guilt and shame for how I then reacted to so many things in my life that were tied to that particular shadow and trauma, or, whichever terms you prefer for these things that shape our autopilot. I didn't even realize that because I was proud of my sexuality, because I do believe that we have a lot of power there. But when I look back, I can honestly say I was choosing risky situations, partners that were not better for me, high vibe, people that enhanced my life. I was just looking for validation. And once you realize that and can let that go, you become stronger. And nobody can say anything like, the slut jokes. I would joke around and slut pride. But the thing is it really wasn't, because inside I was ashamed of what I had done. Again, not embracing sexuality. That was the good side of it. But the fact that I was using it for validation and to fill a hole inside myself. And once I could see that for what it is and let it go, it actually turns out that as much as I do love sex, I'm not the nymphomaniac I thought I was, because I'm no longer trying all the time to get the validation that I'm worthy and wanted by someone else, because I have become enough for myself. But that is how the places where you have guilt or shame is our vulnerabilities. It's why we build those walls around ourselves to keep everybody out, is because we don't like looking at those parts of ourselves. But once we can speak about them in a safe place, once we can speak them to someone else who doesn't go, oh my God, you horrible person. And we realize 95% of how we thought we were going to be judged, which is where a lot of the guilt comes from, because we're judging ourselves. It's not the people out there. They're not judging us unless they're projecting their things they need to heal because they're judging themselves. But it doesn't have anything to do with you. What does have a lot to do with you is that self-judgment. And as I said, this was the example for me that I realized now people can make jokes or whatever. I could talk to someone about my past that remembers something I did that, I'd sit there and go, I would have been really ashamed of that. It doesn't faze me anymore. And that's how it becomes your armor. Because if it doesn't hurt, if you're not hurt by knowing you did it, you're doing it, then it's not going to hurt when someone else points it out. I mean, if you're somebody who thinks that, awesome, funky colored socks with the Powerpuff Girls on it when you're 50 years old is something you are ashamed of, but you really want to wear them, and you do, you're going to think everybody's judging you. And you're going to get sensitive, and you're going to perceive someone just looking over at you and noticing them as, oh, they're judging me. These are all the things that then you build the guilt. Well, I'm too childish. I shouldn't embrace that part of myself, which is never embrace all the parts of yourself, even the ugly ones, because the ugly ones need to be healed so you can let them go and move into an existence where you're thrilled with yourself. And we do get there. And I'm not there yet. I still have tons of my own struggles that I'm still working through. But by doing this, it doesn't matter if someone else goes, oh, how childish. I can't believe you're wearing kids' socks. It makes me happy. And that's it. And if you're not feeling embarrassed about the fact you're doing it, you're not going to care. If you do have some embarrassment or shame in this sock analogy, then you're going to not only feel judged because somebody made a comment, but you're also going to then project either your reasons, well, they're way too uptight and they just don't know how to have fun, or angry, how dare they judge me for my socks? But how much happier are you if you don't give a fuck? I mean, it's really how anything that you're having struggles with about how you feel about yourself, well, other people are going to trigger that because they're your mirror. That's their job. Their reason for existence in our universe is to show us to ourselves. And so by interacting and having those places where you're uncomfortable and you worry about being judged, work through them. Even if it's with one person you can feel safe with, because as you speak it, the shame, the guilt, the I shouldn't haves, this would have been better if, they all disappear. And when they do, it doesn't matter what anyone says. And there's so many tangential things that you don't even realize are connected to the original event. As I said, in my case, I didn't realize especially behind all the bravado of, I am a strong woman and I embrace my sexuality, that I did carry shame, particularly from our society. And especially because once I'm doing honest reflection, I'm not proud of some of the partners I chose to lay with because I was just looking for someone to validate that I was desirable. But I have been able to forgive myself for that recently, actually, by going through this. And as I said, that was months ago that process started. And just little things, especially as I work through, and this is why you teach what you need to learn, thinking of things for the class, I was able to realize that connected to my shadow work with my dad. I mean, I was going to use some of it for the armor that, someone mentioned something about child molestation. Do I think it's horrible? Yes. Do I not want it in my world? Correct. But I can't condemn it because I know it was a step in order to get wherever it is we need to be, or it wouldn't be in our existence. But I'm also not triggered by it. Do I do things to protect children when I can? Of course I do. I wouldn't take a small, a child of the age, any child actually, around my father, knowing that that was his proclivity. But it also doesn't mean that I don't understand that they were made that way for the lessons we need in our life. And so by being able to forgive that, now I don't have the triggers and I can help transmute where these things are in our world that terrify us or shock us or appall us. I can't transmute them into the world I want if I'm just angrily lashing out uncontrolled because it triggers me. I still work towards changing that to healing the parts of myself that make that need to be there as the mirror. But by not being triggered, I can make intelligent choices to try to shift and change the world into the one I prefer. And it's not painful then. It's the hardest thing to explain, but I spent, 35 years of my life, 30 years, probably from about 8 years old until recently. So 49. Well, no, I'll say 48. Since Ascension started, helped constantly triggered. Constantly. I had so many things in my life that were these shadows. That was where the vulnerability was. And nobody came near my vulnerability. As many of us have said, walls with gunners and, dogs and everything to keep people out from knowing the real me. In fact, I still don't even know the real me. I'm working on it. I'm getting to know me underneath the taking in the projections of the whole world around me, who I'm supposed to be, what masks I should wear with what people, who do they expect me to be? And I was great at putting on the mask and charming everybody and being whoever it is I thought they wanted me to be, that I still, in the process of trying to figure out what do I really want? Who am I really? I'm still figuring it out, but I am a lot closer than I ever was before. Now, what I was saying is about you build these walls around those vulnerabilities, and then you're not able to interact in a healthy way with other people. Because when you have the big walls, everything feels like an attack. Everybody is judging you. Everyone's out to get you. Sometimes we transfer it, especially if we're in a place where we haven't learned to trust the universe yet, that the universe and fate is out to get us. And depending on where you are in your spiritual path, there's a long period of time that many of us go through where you feel, well, I was a horrible person, because we judge ourselves worse than anyone else ever could. And so karma is punishing me. I deserve this. You don't. You get rebalanced. The universe redirects. That's what karma is, the force to move us back into balance, but it is never a punishment. And you are never doing wrong. You're not. You may not be doing the best you can be doing, but you're doing the best you can be doing at that time with what you have, with the energy resources you have, with the stresses that are weighing you down, which is why so much of this method, just looking at your shadows, self-care, all of it is needed in order to prop and build yourself up and start to learn to love you the way other people do. And even if you think nobody does, everybody has someone that loves them. I find it hard to believe that that's not possible, but many of us are really, really unaware of it. And when you keep those walls up, they can't meet you. They can't come in. They can't love you. And it's really hard because I lived in those walls for years. And I thought I am so well protected. The thing is I was well protected. But the little wounded child me inside was still wounded inside. And so it hurt. And everything that was coming at the walls felt like an attack. And it wasn't until I could bring someone into those walls. As I said, he walked in like he owned the place. He had a key. I had no idea how he did it, but came in and I was able to start to heal the little me. And then I could start to open doors for other people and learn how I'm still working on learning how to set boundaries in a way that is moderate and balanced, appropriate for the situation, but also to love myself. Because I think if it comes down to one thing, when you fully love yourself. You will set boundaries. You won't accept things that will hurt you. And they won't happen when you don't accept them. And once you can fully trust in that, you don't need the walls. And that's how it becomes your armor. Because it doesn't matter what anyone says. I'm great no matter what someone says if I'm not close to them. Where I struggle is with my loved ones, worrying if they say something or I worry that I upset them. So that's my personal one that I'm working on. I'm much further along than I was. But my strength is that, I could have people telling me, you know what, you say you talk to dimensional beings, aliens, you're a fruitcake and a nutcase, and we don't want to deal with you, and we don't want, it wouldn't hurt me. I would be fine with that. But when it's a loved one, it's a lot harder. And so we all have these stages we go through. But the image for vulnerability being your armor that I bring up in my mind a lot, particularly when someone is being very energetic in their presentation, yelling, or is I saw a meme that was a monkey with a very calm, serene face while a lion was roaring in his face. But that's really what it comes down to, is you can sit there like that and it really won't bother you. And I haven't had that happen often, but I have had a couple times where a situation was more tense, or there was a lot of, energy going back and forth. And I was able to bring up that image and at least get my emotions under control. Now, it didn't mean I still didn't re-engage and try to work it out, because you don't also, if there is a conflict, particularly in, and it's not even really a conflict, a difference in perception, when you're working with someone, especially towards a collective goal, well, you have to be able to still work it out. But if you let your emotions get the best of you, what you are presenting, what you are projecting, and what you are giving to the other person to work with is not something that can constructively be used to find a solution. And so the ability to be in control of yourself and your own emotion is what makes the vulnerability a superpower. Because if you didn't have anything you were vulnerable about, you wouldn't feel strong by being able not to react in a traumatized way. So we need those roots so that this is an achievement. This is something we have learned and developed, and we can appreciate the contrast between the way we used to react just in an emotional, sometimes temper tantrum sort of way to everything. But we can let that go. And when we do, we are able to move through things in a constructive way. I was actually going to save this for the class I'm doing on perception and projection, but it actually came into our awareness tonight in a way that I want to share. Is really the best way, I think, to resolve conflict is realize none of us see the world the same way. And we spend so much energy trying to get everyone to agree with us that, damn it, that river is blue, and someone else says it's green, and someone else says it's teal. Who cares? That's the way each of us are seeing it. So now, how do we want to move forward? Do we want to make a new word that just we know represents the color that river is to each of us? By figuring out what do we want to do, and stop worrying about who's right or wrong, because guess what? You're always all right. By your perception, you are correct. It doesn't mean that you are right in not needing to look at it, because our shadows will affect what we perceive. So it always comes back to make yourself the cleanest lens you can. And you will find that you are moving more in unison with the other people of higher vibration. And that's what we all want, because, well, if we wanted to be low vibration, you wouldn't be here right now. And so by figuring out, not worrying about, this is what I perceive, this is what you perceive, what do we want to do? The example we used earlier was, well, I think the ball is blue. Well, I think the ball is red. Well, now, do we want to call it blue or red? Or do we want to invent a whole new color and make it purple? We get to decide that when you work in a collective with people. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong. That's why people will insist their perception, because to them it is right. Now, there may be facts that they're not aware of, but guess what? They're not aware of it. So attacking them for being wrong doesn't help anyway. But if you take the ego and the emotion and the need to be right out of it, they can sort out and figure out who's missing what information maybe. What do they need to know to understand it? And as soon as we take that right or wrong out of it, it becomes so much easier. But back to the vulnerability as the armor, is we talk about triggers all the time. Now with shadow work, we don't run from the triggers because we don't want the auto programming to keep triggering us. So we lean into that pointy end and we release them. But the added benefit is as we release them, we are able to see the strengths that we gained from them without having it covered by all the trauma and all the things that trigger us. And as I said, then anybody could say something that used to trigger you and you can see it passively. You know, you may not see it as good, at least not yet, but we can see it as neutral. We can say, they just don't understand. Their perception is different. And that brings up a thing that you don't need to make anybody else understand you. And I, again, struggle with this with the people closest to me, because you want to be understood, because it makes your perception validated. It tells us that, yes, I took that data, I took what was going on, I took what I knew, and I took the correct action, and I'm doing correct in quotes, by my perception. That can still be the wrong answer for what was best for the situation. And it was never that you did something wrong. It just might not have been what you would do with as you gain more knowledge, as we learned more things, as we learn new tools. We can look back and go, well, I wish I had that tool 3 months ago, but since I didn't, I can't beat myself up for the fact I didn't have it then. So it wasn't a mistake, but it is something that we want to change when we make a direction going forward. And so by releasing yourself from the triggers, you empower yourself and it becomes an armor. As I said, it doesn't matter what people say. And I wish, as I said, I could say I'm 100% there. It's tough for me when it's someone close to me. But I'm to the point now where I truly believe the world could sling arrows, as I said, call me insane. That's okay. Because I have worked through my shadows with it. In fact, I had shadows with being considered insane. I went through postpartum depression with my second that triggered bipolar. I cycled depression. It was 2 weeks of depression, 1 week of mania, 1 week normal. And I was on medication that detached me from my intuition, from my ability to feel that I had had my whole life. And that was actually probably when I started to go into the most self-flagellation tailspin, because I no longer had that connection where at least I always felt I was going to be okay. I didn't feel I was going to be okay anymore. Because of that, I had a lot of traumas about being thought of as insane. Because, you know, when you're on a psychiatric med, you start to listen to all of those things in our society where people use the term crazy disparagingly. And yet so many people have what we call mental illnesses. And in most cases, the mental illnesses, and I won't say always, I know there's things, I do believe spirituality can help all of them. But I do understand that there are certain cases where, because of the medical paradigm and the person's beliefs, things like medication and intervention and stuff are necessary. But I also think in most cases, if people are doing the work of their own self-reflection, their spiritual path, and especially shadow work, learning to set boundaries, and learning to listen to their higher self, all of those things, depression, do we still feel it? Yes, there are things, you know, brain chemicals, everything else, but depression isn't as deep when you know you're eternal, when you realize that, you know, we are all parts of God. And so, you know, knowing that makes depression not as much of a cliff as it was when we were younger and didn't believe that. And so by clearing all of these things, you start to realize that what I thought, as I said, was mental illness, bipolar, I've looked at it a lot because it's what I had been diagnosed with. And what I realized was there I was feeling before they started medicating me, if something was in alignment or out of alignment with me, but I was feeling it at a hypersensitive level. So if it was out of alignment with me, I was depressed because I knew this was not what the world was supposed to be. This was not feeling right. What people were telling me one thing, but it felt completely different. So I would end up depressed. But when I moved into alignment with something, when I found something that brought me bliss, now very often it wasn't the great universal bliss that leads us to our life's purpose, because again, lens taming, it was very often like finance related. Taxes would come in and suddenly we go from, struggling to buy groceries to having a couple $1,000s, trigger a manic episode. And so I had a lot of shadows to work through with all of that. But it isn't crazy. It's learning who you are. But as I said, because I believed I was crazy, because I believed, the diagnoses, I knew I felt out of control because I didn't understand what was happening. But now that I do those things, even though they were a shadow, people could call me crazy now. And my vulnerability, which was being afraid of being branded that way, has become my strength. Because not only do I not care, I will openly tell you, I have a history of being bipolar. I have gone through things that are considered mental illness. I have been on medications. It's been over 10 years since then, but it's my armor, because now anybody could say crazy and I'm not going to be triggered. It doesn't hurt. And I can discourse with them and find out where we have common ground, where perceptions are that we need to bring closer into alignment if we're going to work together, or decide that we're not going to work together because we're not in close alignment to do so cleanly. But we can do that without becoming angry, without becoming defensive. But the only way to do that is to clear the shadow work and turn those vulnerabilities into the armor that really lets you move forward in the world. Because fear, hold on, became very thirsty with all that talking. Because what happens is we go into the world and we are going to change the world. Well, when you change the world, people are going to have opinions, and not all of them are going to be flattering. And guess what? That's okay. But that makes this a really important step if you're going to follow your life's purpose, whatever it is. Because whatever really gives you meaning, we always put, I shouldn't say always, because I don't know, but at least from my experience, we put things into our universe that resist the direction we're going in, so we can clarify it, so we can figure out what we really want, how we really feel. If people weren't polluting the ocean, the people whose purpose it is to clean up the ocean and have the joy wouldn't get that joy. And so I'm not saying polluters are good, but they're serving a purpose to allow someone else to have a purpose. But over time, as people do their own inner work, the pollution will stop. Because as you move higher and higher, people can only reach you that are within the same bracket. Picture an old radio tuner. That little line in the center is where you are. You can interact with people whose frequency is on either, in that clear thing that you used to be able to see all the numbers in as it slides, which means the lowest people vibrationally that that are really rooted in 3D, where a lot of the problems of the world, we say they're the ones causing it all. They're not really causing it all, but because we often do, because we're not fully healed yet. And we have our own part of all of the tapestry that makes it work. But the people we consider the most regressive and that we worry are not going to be able to ascend and not going to be, and the problems they're causing is a lot of the things that we tend to think about and cast on them, that they're raising too. The, worst of the worst before I started the ascension, and I hate saying the worst because I really am trying to get out of that mentality I'm just having trouble finding a better way to express it. But the ones we will perceive or we call villains for what they're doing, they're playing their role, but they also are not as heinous as I swear they were before I started channeling and started making this shift. The stories that were in my world then, at least when I look back with my lens now, were much more atrocious than even a lot of the things we're seeing now. And I know the war in Ukraine and everything else, there's still a lot in this world. But believe me, as we heal ourselves, the whole world heals with us, which is utterly beautiful. And we will see it continue to shift that way, because as you do this work, and as I said, as the vulnerability becomes your armor, as we stop, and this actually I'm realizing ties into what I was saying about people having different perceptions. It doesn't matter what perception they have of you. Feel good about yourself. Get to the point where it doesn't matter if people are calling you all sorts of names. You don't have any triggers that those names are going to cause you to act irrationally. And as long as you can act from a place of calm and power, that is, well, I shouldn't say power, but that is your power. By staying calm in any situation, you're able to do what is best for you in that situation cleanly, instead of reacting by autopilot, which we do often. That's part of the programming thing. But the trauma is because autopilots where we'll get short-tempered, snappy, make more ultimatums, all sorts of things that if you're calm, you realize don't serve you. And it doesn't serve the other person either. For those of us that are codependent and won't do it for ourselves, but will do it for other people, guess what? It doesn't serve them either. Because to be able, when you start getting emotional, egos are involved. And so when the ego gets involved, especially if you feel the need to explain where you were coming from, which is a huge thing for me, by the way, is I wanted the validation that the way I was seeing it, the other person knew I didn't mean to hurt them. Not even that they understood. They just understood why I made my choice. I've had to work very recently on letting go of that. They don't need to understand. It's nice if they do. But by realizing that we're going to have these different perceptions and different perspectives, we're not going to agree. And if we're not going to agree, why are the egos beating each other up to say, I was right? Because we're both right, or all 10 of us are right in a larger collective. We all have our own perspective. What's important is not who was perceiving it closest to what the rest of the collective says. What's important is how the collective says, okay, what is the outcome we want and how do we make that happen? And that can only happen once the egos are out of the way. And where this ties into this topic is the egos can only get out of the way. And this is a difficult topic, not difficult topic for me, but a very deeply personal one for me, because it was my Mount Everest, is the victim paradigm. The world, as I said, is out to get us. Even karma is out to get us. We feel like we're getting beat up by the world and everything's unfair. And even when through ascension, it seemed like the universe is nothing but benevolent. In fact, synchronicities and wonderful things have been coming to pass that we see and is very affirmational that the universe has our back. But with other people, we sit there and go, we're being judged, we're being attacked. But the biggest one are these words, it's not fair. If we think to ourselves, it's not fair, then we are in the victim paradigm, because it doesn't matter if it's fair or not. Because what's important is if it is something you perceive as unfair, you set a boundary. You tell them that's not acceptable to you. But whether or not it was fair or not, it isn't you're not trying to balance something on a balance sheet. Because guess what? It's never going to seem to be balanced to everybody involved. Somebody is going to feel slighted. And in fact, chances are everybody in the situation feels that they are the one that was wronged. So let's just throw all of that out and sit there and say, what is it that we want? What is our shared vision? And how do we make that happen? But you can't do that while you still are having shame and guilt, and not being honest about who you are and what's happened to you, and carrying around things that, oh my God, if they ever knew about that time, insert whatever it was, how can I sit here with all these PTA ladies when I know I got, trained by like 10 guys? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that would embarrass you, or not embarrass you. I don't know, because I don't know any of you really that personally. But in other words, these are the things that then maybe you're sitting in church at a wedding going, oh my God, I'm going to get struck by God. And everybody's looking at me with these judging eyes. Well, first of all, if someone watched your video, they're probably not judging you because they were looking for that type of video. But we'll sit there and go, we're horrible people. Everybody's out to get us. And those things stop us from embracing our true self, because we will carry that guilt and shame, and it will not allow us. Now, it doesn't mean you also don't walk around the PTA sharing the link to the video. I want to clarify, that's not part of it. But if something comes up, don't be embarrassed. Own it, because it's part of your life. Even if it's something you would never do now, then you say, when I was younger, I was much more experimentative. And, I own that. And by owning it and getting rid of the guilt and the shame, it doesn't hurt you. And you can get the ego out of the equation when you're trying to work something out with someone else, or just when you're trying to be understood cleanly, because people will ask questions very often, because not only are they curious and they want to share in the vision and understand it better, or they're trying to pick it apart, which there are some people that is because they're trying to fix it. It's not even really that they want to do something to ruin your vision. They just want to show all the places it can go wrong, because it's how their mind works. It's still not that they're, shitting on your vision. They're genuinely actually trying to help you make your vision happen by stopping things from going wrong. But something else that came actually earlier today, that of course everything comes before the class that I end up needing for that class, was, say it takes 1 unit of energy in order to ruminate, think of what could go wrong, and make a plan, or, at least what generally would I do if that goes wrong. Now, 100 times a day, we probably sit and think about things that could go wrong. 100 different things we spent this 1 unit of energy on. 1% of them probably actually might happen. And you know what? When it happens, you're in a better situation to figure out how to fix it in the moment, because you have the latest information. You didn't have that when you were originally ruminating over it. And situations always change. There's always different details to factor in. And it might only take, usually, a lot less. So like 5 units of energy to fix the one thing that was going to go wrong in the day. So if you shift from a model of worrying about what's going to go wrong and always trying to head off problems, and just put yourself in the best situation, whether it's, reading the material on the computer you're going to use, so that if something goes wrong, the techniques to be able to handle it. It doesn't mean you just trust on the universe. Suddenly an IT guy is going to knock on your door for no reason. So you still do the things, but you don't sit there and ruminate, oh my God, what if I can't remember any of my passwords? What if I'm locked out from Starbucks? This would be tragic. We think of all these things that we worry about, and we put so much energy into it. And not only do we not need to, but what a waste of energy that could be directed to weathering the couple things that will come up, which are always there to direct us into a better path anyway, but also to not, actually, I totally lost it. Oh, I hate when that happens. You know what? I think that tells me it's time to open it up for questions and answers anyway.
Yeah, who has a question?
I have to say my trademark, anyone? I watch my videos and I catch myself that I'm always going, anyone have a question?
Yeah, it's so hard for me because I think of things all the time while you're talking, but I don't want to unmute and interrupt. And then I didn't
Did you
take
see
notes.
my text that I posted.
Oh, nope. Let me look at those.
Good idea, Stace.
Melissa, I'll start with yours. And yes, I completely agree that we will do things at different times because we haven't processed the trauma. It's stages that all of us go through. And I'm only at the stage I'm at. I don't even know what else is further, but I'm sure I'll still be doing classes for you guys and you guys will get to know what's further. But yes, when you haven't processed the trauma, the walls are important because you are an injured little child inside. You don't want to just open up your borders to everything when you're not able to deal with them in a healthy way. And that's why the healing is important. Now on to Stacia's. Now, the one thing I will say, Stacia, is there's a difference though. I mean, I do think it's wonderful that you're comfortable and that you are able to do that. But the don't give a fuck switch is misleading. And I've gone through it myself when I had my walls up because little me was quite injured. I had a don't give a fuck switch. To everybody, it looked like I was big bad bitch in charge, comfortable with myself. I mean, my body was a wreck. I looked like I was falling apart medically, but people who knew me thought I had it all together, even though it was obvious I didn't if they were really looking critically. But what happened was it was detachment. It was to protect. It was another form of the wall, really. You know, a do not cross desert to keep people away. Because if I'm don't give a fuck, I don't look warm. I don't look inviting. People aren't going to expect that of me. It's not actually being though where you're open and healed and can let people in. And that's where so much of the growth can occur. When you're shut down in that way, you don't enjoy the joys anywhere near as strongly as you can once you heal them. And you'll still look the same with the no bra or robe. Like, it's great. Because to the outside world, it looks the same. But it's what you are inside. It's because you are overwhelmed. If it's because you reach the point where you have too many things in your life you have to worry about, who has the energy left to worry about whether you look good when you go to Walmart? I mean, really. But when you really don't care, you'll find that you do. As weird as that sounds, I didn't worry about doing my hair, wearing makeup, because I didn't give a fuck. Well, guess what? Now that I've cleared that, I am able to say, no, I like to feel I look sharp. I enjoy these things that make me feel beautiful. And that is part of that healing thing. I'm not doing this for validation or to impress anybody. I'm doing it because it makes me feel good. And so as I said, the stage of don't give a fuck, only you know where you're at. But I can say that it very often is from a place of wounding, or at least it was for me. You know, if I don't care, then I can pretend I don't care. And maybe if I keep saying I don't care long enough, I actually won't. And it feels like you don't for a long time because you're numb. But at least, as I said, with honest self-reflection on myself, I did care. I just wasn't willing to admit it to myself because that would have made it hurt more. Anybody else? Or more Stacia? I'm good with that too. Yeah, I was going to say, Stacia, what you just said, I think that is what I was saying. Sounds like that was dead on then.
You're always dead on. It's kind of trippy.
Well, thank you. Do we have anybody else?
Anybody triggered?
That's always fun things to work on. I've had a few of those recently.
Yeah.
Well, actually, while nobody has anything, I would like to apologize while also explaining, because I feel it's a good lesson for the group, why I had to bail last week. is Peter and I were talking through things, and some of our own shadow work came up. And we very much appreciate and value our time together, but growth is paramount. And it was very important that we work through it then, when it was something that we both needed for our own respective lessons. Because, by the way, that always happens. It's not the universe showing up one person or the other, or both of you always end up having something that you're learning from the experience. But we had to work through that and talk through everything. And so there was a part of me that felt bad bailing, but, and this was Peter's thing that he brought, and I agree with him completely, is we also believe that it's good to see that we do the work too. And even if it puts us in a situation where we feel bad because it changes an obligation or commitment, the growth really is the most important.
When you feel triggered, do you like get defiant or get emotional, or like how do you know that you've been triggered?
Yes, the answer is both. At least for me personally, it depends on what the trigger was. If it's something, and actually I'm kind of realizing this in the moment, and this is one of the reasons I don't prep my lessons, because things come through. And this is really important for me, is that if the response is defiant, if it's angry, if my response feels frustrated, angry, any of those offshoots of anger, it's because my victim paradigm got twinged. I felt something was unfair. There was an injustice that happened to me because of someone else, or someone else that I care about, because you can have it happen in response to defending someone as well. So the angry type of trigger response is something that's rooted in the victim paradigm, or feeling that something is unfair, and not necessarily another person. It could still be the universe if you're still in a paradigm where you view the universe as your attacker. Sad is where I have guilt or shame, where I feel like I failed somebody, is my biggest trigger to tears. Or no, it is because I feel I failed somebody, but very often because I'll think I fucked up. That's when the self-flagellation comes in. I should have known that this is what they wanted. How could I have been so, all of those things. If it's tears, now I'm exaggerating that because I don't have that level of the points anymore. I'll start self-flagellating, and I am pretty good at calling myself out now and stopping it, because I know that's what caused all my autoimmunes. That's not something I want to do to myself, but I'll feel it. And that's when the sad reaction to the triggers happen, is, at least for me, when it's someplace I feel I should have done better, I messed up, I disappointed someone, I hurt somebody unintentionally. And as I said, and then to answer that, the angry ones would be more rooted for me, at least in the victim paradigm. Something's unfair. Anybody?
Yeah, I agree. I get to feeling angry and sad. It's like a cycle of emotions, like
Right.
a big wheel. That's how I feel when I'm triggered. But
Yeah.
luckily now I'm to the point where I recognize it a lot sooner. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Let me step outside of the situation and look at it from other angles.
You know what? I want to throw in that fear is probably also a very big,
Mhm.
cause of
another
being
question.
triggered.
Mhm.
But I
Well,
think when it's fear-based, it is more likely also to pop as anger. Because what are you afraid of if you think everything is fair and balanced? So I think they're still tied, but I can see how, at least sometimes as I'm thinking about it, it may be more fear than, the unfairness, at least in some situations, but I still think the roots are the same.
And Trina, are you able to forgive people without an apology from them?
Yes,
Now?
but it took quite a bit.
Because I
Again, with
don't
the
know
fair,
how to do that yet.
well, let me walk you through my story. I told you about my dad. I forgave him. In fact, he was one of the first people I forgave in this. We haven't talked. He never
He's never
apologized.
apologized.
In
Wow.
fact, when I said something to him, the most he said was, I am sorry for whatever I did that might have hurt you, which is not owning it. And I didn't feel that that was an apology. Guess what? I don't need an apology. I don't care. It's his path. Nobody needs to make amends to you because it wasn't that it was unfair. I mean, it may have been very unfair for your perception, and you may have felt attacked or anything that, again, builds that victim paradigm. But you're not a victim. I wasn't a victim. And I've been in situations that on paper, especially an earlier unhealed me, would have said, oh my God, like literally like victim of crime victims. But guess what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The past is the story we write for the who we are now, so we can understand ourselves. Nobody, it's not the need to apologize. It's the need for boundaries, because they don't have to say they're sorry. They just have to not do it again when you put the boundary there. And if they won't listen to that, you need to stick to that boundary. But as long as their behavior changes to match what your boundary is, it doesn't matter the words that come out of their mouth. And in fact, depending on how unhealed they are, is how likely they are to just lie and say they're sorry to shut you up. Because that is what we do, because we want to do whatever will get the other person off our back, particularly when we're not committed to our own growth. Then we don't care. Just when we're committed to our own growth, and this may give you something with whoever you're talking about, this shows that they're likely at least self-reflecting. If they're not willing to give an apology, they still need to work on their own healing to realize the difference in perspectives and that everybody is right. There's a lot of things. I'm not saying it's a healed state, but if someone's just going to give lip service to an apology to shut you up, it's more unhealed and they have further to go than someone who's at least self-reflecting and refusing to. Again, it's their actions, what you wanted them to apologize for. What's more important is that you set a boundary to get your needs met or to stop boundaries from being trampled. Again, I don't know your specific situation, but in the course of doing that, they'll either step up to meet the challenge or they won't. But you never know. And if they step up to meet the challenge, do you really need an apology then? They've changed and they're doing what it is you need them to do. If they don't step up, then an apology was just bullshit in order to get you off their back. So in neither case does an apology really benefit you. Does that help?
Yes, a lot. Thank you.
Good, my pleasure. Do we have anybody else? Or maybe we'll actually get done on time. That would be interesting.
Hell no.
No.
Just kidding.
Hey, I'm good if people have more questions.
Yeah, I don't know why. I feel like Melissa has one, but I'm not going to call you out.
I guess that was good instinct since she raised her hand.
Yeah, I was looking everywhere trying to look for the little hand thing, and I don't know.
Oh.
But anyway.
Oh my gosh. Whoa. I got to
What-
trust
Good
myself.
instinct.
Yeah, I don't know. So this is kind of going off of what Stacia was saying. So
Yeah.
I've had conversations with this person about the things that I have anger and animosity
Sure.
towards her about. And all I get in return is, you can't keep holding that over my head forever. You can, I've changed. I'm a different person. But she's never actually taken the time to acknowledge the things that myself and my siblings present her with. Like, she just
Right.
doesn't take accountability for it.
But did she change?
Kind of. I
Well,
mean,
then it doesn't
I think
matter.
she's changed
I
more.
get
than-
why you feel that way, but as long as she is making the changes that were needed, she doesn't need to say, because guess what? If she's made the changes, she is holding herself accountable inside because she's changing it. If she wasn't, you wouldn't see any change. Now, I know we want those apologies. I get it. And we want people to take responsibility so they won't do it again. But again, if they're making the changes, they're already looking at themselves and saying, no, that's not how I want to be. I can see where this is making it so. And again, with boundaries, maybe I can't interact with, my family, or I can't interact with, this person. And so it might be obviously driven by the repercussions of the actions. That's what happens with boundaries. But she knows she needs to change, or she wouldn't be working at changing. She doesn't need to say to you, even though I know obviously you want her to, that I take responsibility for everything I did and I'm sorry for it. It's healthier if she's at a place where she can. And it takes a lot to get there, especially when you're someone who gives a lot for, wanting to try to make everybody happy and then getting really upset when you fail at it. You're a lot less likely to be willing to say, I made a mistake, because your entire sense of worth is built on other people being happy. So when you fail, she's self-flagellating anyway. She's just not healed enough to be able to say the things to you you need her to. But I really do believe she has the lesson, or you wouldn't be seeing those changes.
The good thing is that we're all here working on healing ourselves. And that's what really matters, it's so hard for me to come up with the words, but yes, what really matters is you recognizing that there was a problem and you take responsibility for your part, and whether they do or not, that's not on you.
Right. Agreed.
And
agreed.
Yeah. And then you working through and moving past it. Also, I just want to add that as we work on our healing and ascension, not everything and everyone is meant to stay in our lives forever. Right. And I'm not saying leave your partner, leave your best friend, whatever, but sometimes those things just fall away because you're not a vibrational match anymore. And it can be it can be wonderful. It can be wonderful.
It's actually, I would even hazard to say it's always wonderful from a wide enough perspective and far enough back,
yeah,
but in the time, it can feel very traumatic, but it really is. We end up letting go. Those people who aren't meant to be in our orbit will gradually fade away. But the good news is they make it too in their timeline. Everybody gets this. We just don't see everybody else's perspective and them going through it, but everybody's path leads up the same mountain. So, but I have to thank you, Phoenix, so much, by the way, for all of that. I thought that was wonderful. It is the self-healing. It all comes down to us and our perspective. There's nothing better than knowing that as we heal ourselves, the whole world heals with us. We see better and better the more we look for it. We see people raising and joining and forming collectives. We've seen the whole world shift. Oh, by the way, plastics, this is what I was going to say is I remember we were going, why aren't there more alternatives for petroleum plastics? We looked, there was not much out there. This was only 2-3 months ago. So we switched over to Apple very recently, and I needed to get a phone case. And I found phone cases that are of flaxseed-based plastic. I found, while I was looking for them, a website that helps companies shift everything into biodegradable, organic-based plastics for packaging, for everything. And so this was only in like a matter of, I know this can't be brand new technology. because it's already out there and being produced, but there was nothing about it. The world literally shifted into what we wanted to see. And I wanted to show you this because in one of my earlier classes, I was talking about how we can set intention and shift into the world we want to be. And I said, I want a world with less plastic. I'm changing that to petroleum plastic because I'm really intrigued with these bioorganic and biodegradable plastics, and they're still calling them plastics. But I said, and I held up my water bottle, I need to make the changes myself in order to make this world. And I just want to show off my glass water bottle. I made the change, and now the world is raising up to meet the changes we want, and we're starting to see evidence of that. It happens with everything. Start making the changes, walking towards the future you want to see. Do the work, the self-reflection, learn to set boundaries, which I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but believe me, the boundary part is vital.
And
because,
can I just add that?
Oh yeah, please do. I need to drink something anyway.
Boundaries do not mean fight.
Mhm.
Boundaries do not mean, but you never apologize, but you,
Right.
but you. No, boundaries is like, this is what I expect. And if this happens again, this will happen. And
Right.
when it happens again, you do that thing. You do not let it slide, because that
Can a
teaches people.
boundary be like, if I don't get an apology, then you're not allowed, then I'm not going to see you and you're not allowed in my home again? Because that is the boundary that I set until that we are able to get an apology and see that you did wrong.
Honestly,
You're not allowed in my
no.
space.
You are. It is a boundary. It is a boundary to say you're not allowed in my space. But to say I have to get an apology is, again, your choice. But whether you can control him or not to do so, you have to let go of the need to. But by all means, if you don't feel he's trustworthy or some reason because of the lack of apology, and that's where you are, then yes, that is a valid boundary.
He lost my trust because he went through my phone while he was babysitting my kids. And so he lost my trust that way. And so until like I get an apology,
Right.
or he shows that he sees that he made a mistake, I don't want him around me or in my house anymore because of
Let
that.
me give you a really constructive tool if you are interested in being able to sort through this with him. Is not, and I need an apology for why you went in my phone. Say, I want to understand, what is it that you weren't trusting that made you feel the need to go through my phone? And don't trust him, obviously, without working through the why. You also don't drop it and then not work through what's an obvious, issue of trust. And I'll tell you, the reason most people don't trust someone else is because of their own shadows, whether it's a trauma because they had people that cheated on them in the past, or whether it's a projection because they're a cheater and then they assume everybody else is. I don't know. But without talking to him honestly, without anger on his side, if he does, you can stop the conversation as well. But you need to get to the root of why he did it. Just apologizing for it doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. And not because he wants to, because he obviously has something, again, whether projection or trauma, that drove him to do it, despite knowing if you found out that you would be upset. He had a genuine concern and worry of some sort. And that's what you guys need to get to the root of. Again, assuming this is something you want to work out. And here's the really beauty of it. You'll probably get that apology that you want once you can honestly, and he can honestly work through whatever it is that caused that action and release that shadow. If he's able to do that, then you would most likely get that apology you want. But it's not going to happen if he's still feeling that he was justified because he's living in a victim paradigm where he feels that was the fair or right thing to do, because again, it's only from his perspective. He can't apologize for something he thought was right, at least, or believed at the moment. So getting to the root of why is the only thing I think that can really help that.
I like that a lot. So you're saying you're in belief that if like you're looking through your partner's phone, looking through a text, looking for a
Right.
text that's saying he's cheating, you're most
Right.
likely doing something wrong yourself, because that's
No,
why
I
you're
said that's
looking for
one of
something.
them.
Yeah, no,
That is one of the
it's
things that
most likely
happens, but
one of the
actually the
things. Yeah,
much more likely one is trauma. Probably a lack of trust because someone cheated on him before. Because the projection one, it does happen, but
Yeah.
it's actually much more often that it's someone was wounded or traumatized by a situation where their trust was betrayed. And so then
Gotcha.
they fear that their newer partner is doing the same thing. And so the worries start to build on them until literally they are compelled to check to reassure themselves. Now, again, this isn't to excuse it. It's to show you that he, most likely anyway, has his own shadows to work through about it. And it's something the two of you will need to talk out, but it's hard to do without egos getting involved of who was right, who was wrong, who was the victim in this, what was fair, what was unfair. You know, well, I did this because you did. None of that will help you solve it, but helping find why he didn't trust you and felt the need to do that will open the dialogue to hopefully help him heal that and get you the apology you want. And if you find out there is nothing there, then the other possibility is still a possibility, but I wouldn't jump to that means he's cheating, because it actually is a lot less likely. We're much more traumatized than we are, wanting to hurt the people we love or anything like that.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, I mean, it's almost 10 after, so I'm good if everyone else is.
Okay. Well, then we will go ahead and end for today. Thank you so much,
you,
Trina,
everybody.
for joining us again. And we
Oh,
just
thank you.
love having you as part of us. And we will see you not next week, but the next. Is that?
I think so, but I don't even know. You'll have to tell me.
Okay, we will make sure, and then we will post the details.
Sounds
Thanks,
good. Yep. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.